Hello everyone, I'm happy to be here with all of you at the Facebook office in Bandstand. I'm Chaitanya Charan Das. I'm an author on science and spirituality and a speaker. So I will be speaking on the topic of reincarnation today based on my latest book, Demystifying Reincarnation. And I have 3 Facebook pages. The Chaitanya Charan Das, the Spiritual Scientist, which is also my website, and Gita Daily, Wisdom, which is related to my website Gita Daily, where I blog on the Gita every day. I am grateful to Ishant and Sapna from Phoenix and Vanilla for taking care of my Facebook pages. And today's event has been organized by Fingerprint, Neeraj especially, and Shikha. I'm grateful to them also. And today we will be talking on reincarnation based on some standard questions which come up whenever the topic of reincarnation comes up. So I will address 5 or 6 questions depending on the availability of the time. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so Guruji, can you tell us how does reincarnation really matter to me as an individual or to any one of us?
Yeah, I'll start with how it began to matter to me personally. My first introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, which is a prime book talking about reincarnation, was through a Bhagavad Gita recitation competition when I was around 5. So I memorized a chapter of the Gita and then I won a prize at that time. And at that time, I read about the concept of the soul and its reincarnation. I didn't find it very relevant. But over the years, especially because death is such an undeniable reality in our life, the question props up. You know, what happens after death? Does anything happen at all? Woody Allen said that it's not that I'm afraid of death, I just don't want to be there when it happens. Now, death doesn't work like that. You know, we will be there and we will have to die. Not only we will have to die, our loved ones, we often see them departing in front of our eyes. So for me, when I was in the 10th, just after I cracked my 10th standard exam, within a month my mother was diagnosed of blood cancer and she passed away. So that was the time when I started getting into metaphysics seriously. So for every one of us, a sign of human intelligence is to prepare for the future, to look ahead to the future and prepare for the future. So the question of reincarnation matters because in the future for all of us, there is the end of our life, that is death. And what happens after death? This is a question which I felt I wanted answers to. And anyone who has actually confronted death among the family, social circle, this question does matter to all of us. So in that sense, when I started researching the subject, I found something very striking, that everywhere people talk about living forever. You know, there are hundreds of millions literally of romance novels, romance movies. They all have this theme of happily ever after. So we want to live forever and to love forever. So why do we have this longing at all? So it could just be sentimental wish fulfillment, that we desire to live forever. But I wanted to know what is the reality, and is there any way to know what the reality is? So once in my teenage years, one of my fascinations was astronomy. So I used to look at a telescope, through a telescope at the sky. And as I was looking at the stars, at one time it just struck me. I was looking at it and suddenly my thoughts went off in some other direction. And after a couple of minutes when I came back, I realized that the stars over there are fascinating, but sometimes the thoughts inside me can become so much more fascinating that they can take my attention away. So what is there inside me that is actually me? And does that survive death? So I would say the question of identity, activity and destiny all these three are intrinsically related. So we are all busy with our activities in our life. I want to achieve this, I want to get this job, I want to get this house, and we all want to fulfill our destiny, whatever it is we have decided. But all this is related with fundamentally our identity. So who we are and what we are meant to achieve. This is the question that the philosophy centered on existence after death or existence before birth, which is all what reincarnation is about. That's what it answers. So whether reincarnation is for real or not, there is a question that is of relevance to every single one of us, because we will be confronted with whatever the reality is in due course of time. Thank you.
Okay, so are there like any well-documented cases, that support reincarnation?
Yeah.
And how do you basically, they are not fake or false, or
Okay.
these are not frauds, basically?
Right. Yeah. Thank you. This was the question which actually got me into serious study of reincarnation. At one level, it could be a sentimental. None of us want to die, and therefore we have some people in the past imagined that there is something within us which lives on after death. But when I got into this field of scientific study of reincarnation, I found that there are many researchers who had done quite rigorous research. The pioneer among such research was Dr. Ian Stevenson from the University of Virginia, and he was the head of the Department of Personality Studies, and over 50 years traveling across all the inhabited continents, he documented several thousand cases. And he had 4 levels of evidences. So the first, of course, was recollections. That, say, children suddenly, when they're 3, 4, 5, or sometimes even earlier, they suddenly tell, "Mummy, Mummy, I want to go to my other mummy." Or sometimes they just start walking away themselves to some other place where they say they live. Or sometimes son tells to his father, "Papa, I was big then, I'm small now." So now this could just be childhood fantasy, but several of the cases which Stevenson found were of clearly documented facts which could be verified. So recollections of verifiable facts is the first level of evidence. The second level of evidence is recognitions. When the children are taken to the venue of their claimed past lives, there they meet people and recognize them, they recognize places, they tell about events that happened over there. That's recognitions. Third is behaviors. Because the children behave as if they were the person who had deceased. So they exhibit the appropriate emotions in the relationship which they had in the previous life. Not only that, say if somebody had died because of drowning, then the children have hydrophobia in this life, fear of water. Although there's nothing in their genetics which might predispose them towards that. And the strongest evidence which Stevenson found, which he compiled in a huge tome called Where Reincarnation and Biology Intersect, is of birthmarks and birth defects. I say, for example, if a person in the previous life had been run over by a truck, had been knocked down and a truck had gone over the thigh, and that had been a part of the wounds that caused the death, then the child is born with a very distinctive birth defect, where the thigh is shaped like normal till a particular point, and then it just becomes a complete hollow, as if it is flattened over because of running of a truck. And researchers have found that these cases of birthmarks and birth defects have no normal reason. Scientists know that birthmarks and birth defects come from 2 main sources. One is they may come from genetics. In some families, some people just have certain birthmarks, birth defects, or they may come because when the mother is pregnant, she may ingest some substances which may affect the body of the child. But in more than 50% of the documented cases of birthmarks, neither of these factors are present. So, in such cases beg for an explanation. So, I'd like to give one specific case which demonstrates this. So, so this is a case of Necip Unlutaskiran. He was born in Turkey in a place called Adana, and when he was around 4, from that time onwards he started saying that my name is Necip, but my name is Necip Budak. And he said, I live in a place called Mersin. So in Mersin, he says, I have a wife over there and I have kids over there and I want to go and see them. His parents were bewildered. His parents, Turkey is primarily a Muslim country, and his parents naturally did not believe in reincarnation. So just tried to dismiss him, silence him, neglect him, but he didn't pay any attention. So finally, as he grew older, he started telling his parents, if you don't take me there, I will go there myself. Then finally, when his mother had taken him to her father's place, her father had just recently got married, and his wife, new wife, happened to be from Mersin. And when Necip mentioned to her that, no, I was Necip Budak, this boy mentioned, he says, yes, I knew a person named Necip Budak, and he had been stabbed to death. So he said, yes, I am that person. So then his grandfather was intrigued, and he took him to their house, to the house of Necip Budak. And he went there. When he went there, although he had never been to Mersin, he led them all the way exactly to the house. And there, in that house, lived a woman who was a widow. And she had been married to a man named Necip Budak. And not only did Necip Unlutaskiran recognize her, he recognized his children from their photos, he recognized the neighborhood, recognized several other neighbors, and along with that, so there was the recollections which were accurate, there were the recognitions which were accurate, along with that were behaviors. His widow, she had remarried, and when Necip saw his former wife's photo with her new husband, he was so infuriated with jealousy that he picked up the frame and wanted to break it apart. And when he saw his children, who were actually older than him now, some of them, he started offering paternal affection to them, fondling their hair and treating them as if they were his children. More than that, this Necip had been a very short-tempered person. So one time when he had quarreled with his wife, he had got angry and had attacked her with a knife. And she had dodged the blow, but the knife had grazed her thigh and it left a lifelong scar over there. And now when Necip mentioned this, so Stevenson and his associates who were investigating the case, they had one of their female assistants. They took this woman privately and they found that she actually had a scar in her thigh area. And she said that this had been given to her when her husband had attacked her. Now for a boy who has never seen a woman, who is living in a conservative culture, for that boy to know about a scar on a private part of her body, it's impossible. Most significantly, for Necip, in Necip's case, he had 7 birthmarks on his body. Not 1, not 2, but 7. And these 7 birthmarks indicated that he would say that this was the place where I was stabbed. And Necip actually had been a quarrelsome person. He was also a drunkard. So one time he had got an altercation, and the person with whom he had quarreled, that person had stabbed him multiple places. So Necip would say, he would point to his birthmarks and he would say, this is where I was stabbed in my previous life. Now because it had been a case of murder, there were police records of the post-mortem had been done, and they had the location of the exact places where the fatal wounds had been inflicted. And Stevenson divided the human body into XY coordinates, 120 XY coordinates. So, and then he correlated how precise is the matching between the position of the fatal wound in the previous life and the birthmark in this life. So if the two match, the probability of that is 1 by 120. Now if 7 birthmarks match, then the probability of that is 1 by 120 raised to the power of 7. So that is an astronomically low probability, such cases. So cases like these are not just 1 or 2. There are hundreds of cases where all 4 are strongly present: recognitions, recollections, behaviors, and birthmarks and birth defects. And these comprise very persuasive evidence for reincarnation, that there is something which existed in the body of Nasib Budak, and that something left his body and came into the body of Nasib Unlu Taskiran. So that is what reincarnates.
So if there are so many cases, okay, with strong evidence about reincarnation and all of basically reincarnation as a concept, if it's real, why is it that not all of us can remember our past lives?
Yeah. Actually, we can't remember our past lives for multiple reasons. First is that it's just our nature to forget. If we consider what we were doing 5 years ago, if I ask even just someone what somebody was doing at this particular time 1 week ago, it's very difficult for us to remember. Even this life, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there might be phases in our life which we don't remember at all. So forgetting is a natural feature of the human body, the human mind, whatever you want to say. Along with that, we have an innate psychological defense mechanism by which memories that are traumatic, although they remain in our mind very intensely for some time, but over a period of time, for healing to take place, those memories fade into the background. So for the soul, death and then birth, both of these are traumatic events. Death means the rupture of the soul from a setting in a life in which it was completely entrenched, and birth means suddenly being launched into a new place, a new family, in a new body. So both of these are very disorienting events, and that's why it's normal that the memory of our past lives gets blocked out. So a new life is a chance for us to make a new beginning. And if we had too many flashbacks of everything that happened in the past, we would not be able to move forward with this new beginning. In spite of our natural forgetfulness, in spite of the psychological defense mechanism of forgetting traumatic events, it's still significant that many children do remember their past lives. And that is despite a phenomena which researchers have documented called as childhood repression of past life memories. So especially in those families where the parents disbelieve in reincarnation, in those cases the parents often actively try to discourage their children from speaking about the past life memories. And now for the children, if they speak or do something which displeases their parents, and especially we are talking about very small children, not the children who have come to the age of rebellion, say 3, 4, 5. So for those children, if their parents strongly disapprove something, they just stop speaking about it most of the time. They stop doing that thing. So many past life memory cases get suppressed because of this. So it's amazing that in spite of all this, some people are able to remember their past lives. And many of these cases who remember their past lives are despite concerted attempts at suppression. Or there are cases, say, of reincarnation among people from different religions. So in my book I narrated a case of one Naresh Kumar who claimed to be Mushir Ali Shah in his previous life. Now because of the religious tensions between Hindus and Muslims in India, neither family, they were in UP, which is also a little volatile, neither of them wanted a reincarnational connection between the two families from two different religions. And many times parents, they try to take their child to an exorcist, they try to starve their child, they often, out of superstition, they put their child on a wheel and rotate the wheel counterclockwise, hoping that that will undo the memories. And in this way, they make concerted efforts to suppress those memories. And there was a case of one boy, Jasbir Singh. He one day when he was just about two and a half, he told his parents that, I belong to a Brahmin family and I cannot eat the food cooked in this low caste house. Can you imagine a child who is just barely 2.5? What does he understand about clean and unclean food, where the food is cooked? And he was so adamant that his father for the next several years actually had to pay a Brahmin to cook food in his house and get to his house 3 times a day. So these are cases of extraordinary resilience among the children because of which they are able to remember their past lives. So we need to turn the question around rather than asking why most of us are not able to remember our past lives. Now how is it that still a significant number of people remember their past lives? And just as we can from some indicators infer the reality, just like when we are cooking rice, we don't need to eat the whole rice to know that it is cooked. Just by the fact that we have some people, if a few grains are cooked, then that's enough to know that the rice is being cooked. So like that, even if there is one documented case of a child who remembers the past life, that is enough as evidence for reincarnation. Now William James, a psychologist, he gave the scientific principle for this. He said if you want to disprove the idea that all crows are black, you don't have to show that all crows are white. Just showing one crow that is white is enough. So similarly, even if there is one case of documented past life memories which is strongly established, then that is enough to strongly support the understanding that there is something beyond the body which survives the body and reincarnates.
Okay. So does reincarnation mean that all of us have a soulmate basically?
Yeah. I answer questions on Quora. So one of the questions I was asked when I wrote on this reincarnation was this, that one boy asked that, I love a girl and we want to marry, but our parents are not agreeing. So I want to know what karma can I do by which I can marry her in my next life. So now when he asked this question, I gave an elaborate answer, but the point here is that the notion of reincarnation has been taken by Bollywood and it has been romanticized, sensationalized and trivialized. Romanticized means there are many movies in which, say, the hero and heroine are somehow not able to unite and both of them die. And the same actor and actress, they do a double role and they come back in exactly the same forms, same looks. And then in the next life, they take revenge against whoever hurt them in the previous life and they unite. So this romanticization of reincarnation actually makes reincarnation into simply another fictional tool. Just like in some movies there may be ghosts, there may be vampires. So reincarnation also becomes like that, and it drives the attention away from the serious research that has been done about reincarnation. So the important thing is what reincarnates, if at all there's a reincarnation, that what reincarnates is not the body, it is the soul. The very word reincarnation means that reincarna. Karna refers to flesh, like we have in carnivorous animals. In means to come inside, re means again. So to come back again in flesh, that is reincarnation. And when you come back again in flesh, you don't come back in the same body. So a person who has died and they reincarnate, they will never come back in the same body. And that's why the romanticized depiction of reincarnation is actually a distortion. So when we talk about the concept of a soul mate, now the focus, because of the romanticization of the concept, is on the mate. Whereas if we approach it with a more serious and philosophical or even a scientific bent of mind, the focus should be on the soul. The soul is who we are. The soul is what survives death. So rather than focusing on the mate part, if we focus on the soul part, then that will help us understand ourselves better. Now having said that, as far as the mate part is concerned, the soul has an eternal longing for love. And the spiritual wisdom traditions of the world, and especially the Bhakti wisdom tradition of India, explains that we may get different amounts of love. Our longing for love may be fulfilled in different ways by different people. And wherever this longing for love is fulfilled, that's wonderful. There is a traditional prayer which says, Tvameva mata cha pita tvameva, tvameva bandhusya sakha tvameva, tvameva vidya dravinam tvameva, tvameva sarvam mama deva deva. It's a prayer offered to God which says, you are my mother, you are my father, you are my brother, you are my friend, you are my wealth, you are my intelligence, you are my everything. Now what does this mean literally? Does it mean that it's not saying the mother is God, rather you are my mother, you are my father. What this means is that actually during our life journey, we get love, care, shelter from different places, different people. And whoever offers us any love, this Bhakti wisdom explains that it is God offering their love through that person. So when a mother breastfeeds her child, that is one of the most sweetest and selfless expressions of love. And yet, the mother did not do anything special when the child was born to produce or milk from her breast. The same God who sent a child into her womb and brought that child out also provided milk for that child through the breast of the mother. So, the point which I am making here is that we get love from various channels. Our mother, our father, our friend, our partner, our spouse. Some of people may get a lot of strength and security from their money, from their intelligence. Yes, we may get this, but ultimately it is God who is offering it to us through these sources, through these channels rather. And the nature of the world is that whatever relationships we have, they will last for some time and then they will end. So some relationships will work out, some may not work out. So actually the soul's enduring relationship is with God. That means actually the soul is longing to love forever and live forever. And that enduring relationship of love is meant to be fulfilled through God. That doesn't mean that we reject our other relationships. It means we spiritualize those relationships. So the ultimate soulmate for the soul is not a person of the opposite gender or whatever in this world. Actually the ultimate soulmate for the soul is God. And the purpose of reincarnation is to reunite with that eternal soulmate. The Bhagavad Gita explains that God is present right now also in our hearts. And even the person who holds us in the tightest embrace, that person cannot be as close to us as God always is in our heart. So, yes, we can have satisfying relationship with people in the world. To whatever extent they work out, that's wonderful. But no relationship is going to last forever. And our longing for lasting relationship will be fulfilled when we harmonize our horizontal relations in the world with our vertical relationship with God. So He is our soulmate, and during our life journey, if we find a compatible partner with whom we can move forward in our spiritual evolution, that's wonderful. Thank you.
All right, there's one more question that I wanted to ask. So now, so far we've been talking about human beings and, us being reincarnated. Does this mean that animals also have a soul? Does this apply to them as well?
Yeah. Animals also exhibit consciousness. See, the symptom of the soul is consciousness. Just like if we are in a room which is dark, how do we know whether there is the sun risen outside? We see the sunlight. So just as sunlight is a symptom of the sun, similarly consciousness is a symptom of the presence of the soul. So wherever consciousness is present, that's where soul is present. Since animals clearly have consciousness, so therefore they also have souls. Now there are some traditions which hold that only humans have souls because humans have a spiritual faculty. We can inquire about higher truths of life, and animals have not been seen to inquire about metaphysics, about life's ultimate questions, and based on this they infer that animals don't have souls. However, from the perspective of the Bhagavad Gita, this difference is not because of the absence of the soul, it is because of the presence of a less evolved consciousness of the soul. So basically, we as souls are on a multi-lifetime journey of spiritual evolution. And the souls in animal bodies, their consciousness is relatively under-evolved. And that's why they function just for the basic bodily drives. They look for food, they look for sex, they look to find for sleeping, and they look for power, show of strength, fighting, defending themselves. Now we humans also have these 4 drives, but along with this, because our soul is more evolved in the human body, we can also inquire about ultimate purpose of life. So the difference in consciousness between human beings and animals is not because animals don't have souls, but because the soul is less evolved. But wherever there's consciousness, soul is present over there.
Okay, so you just said that, you know, we also, our soul goes through basically a spiritual evolution, like, you know, we evolve with every stage. Can reincarnation in this aspect help us address, you know, the current world problems we have, such as social discrimination or terrorism or even climate change for that matter?
Yeah. Whenever we talk about any philosophy, now what does it matter at the ground level? That's what we all would like to know. If we consider what is the practical implication of reincarnation, it will imply that we are at our core spiritual beings, and spiritual beings means that we will find lasting fulfillment through spiritual growth, through spiritual evolution, not through material gratification. Now consider the climate change and the ecological catastrophe that is set to fall on the world. Largely this has been caused because of excessive materialism, because people are indiscriminately wanting to enjoy, exploit, dominate the resources provided by nature without due consideration of the ecological balances. So the more we human beings live materialistically, the more we damage the ecology. The prominent scientist E.O. Wilson, he found out that actually all species make some constructive contribution to the ecology. So for example, if the grass gets burnt out, the herbivorous animals will suffer. If the herbivores are wiped out, the carnivores will suffer. But there's one species which makes no constructive contribution to the ecology. If that species were wiped out, there would be no ecological problem for anyone. In fact, most ecological problems would be solved. That species, unflatteringly for us, is the human species. So it is we humans are actually contributing in a destructive way to the ecology. That's because when human beings are materialistic, then they exploit in a disproportionate way. So growth is natural, but cancer is unnatural growth. When cancerous cells grow in the body, they grow in a way that destroy the cells around the body and ultimately the body. So when we human beings live materialistically, the way we progress is not harmonious natural growth, it is disharmonious cancerous growth. And even prominent ecologists have said that if we are to move towards ecological sustainability, we have to equip people to find non-material enrichment, by which they will stop chasing after the culture of consumption that is leading to the destruction of the ecology. And that non-material enrichment can be very powerfully provided an intellectual foundation through the understanding of reincarnation. So that's how reincarnation can address the fundamental roots of the materialistic worldview that is causing the ecological crisis. Now, if you to consider social discrimination, that's also based on an understanding that people belong to particular race, particular gender, particular nationality, particular class, and we discriminate. But if you understand that we at our core, all of us are souls, then that has a profoundly unifying effect. The Bhagavad Gita says that the person who is spiritually enlightened, that person sees not just all human beings equally, but all living beings equally. In 5.18 in the Bhagavad Gita it is said, Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavihastini shunichaiva shvapakecha pandita samadarshinaha. So whether it is elevated human being, whether it is a morally degraded human being, whether it's a dog, whether it is a elephant, whether it is a cow, a person sees the same spiritual essence in everyone. And this, seeing the spiritual essence in everyone, that can bring about a culture of inclusivism. So more and more there is an attempt towards egalitarian society nowadays. Now that egalitarianism is a longing that we all should be going together, but that longing needn't be just sentimental. It can actually have a philosophical foundation when we have a worldview centered on reincarnation, because it helps us to see that in actuality we are all same living beings. All of us are of the same spiritual nature. So today two countries may be fighting, say USA and North Korea, or on the verge of a war. But a reincarnation centered worldview can help us understand that a soldier who is thinking of killing a North Korean, American soldier who is thinking of killing a North Korean soldier may in the next life be born a North Korean. And a Korean person may be born as a US person, US citizen. So our present identities are temporary, and there is essential commonality among all of us. So when we understand this, this can actually break down the barriers that we have created based on identifying ourselves with the body. And thus discrimination based on material designations can be broken down through spiritual realization, and that spiritual realization is fostered by the reincarnation centered worldview. The ancient sages of India have said that sarve janah sukhina bhavantu, that let all people be happy. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu, let there be auspiciousness in the lives of everyone. Na kaschit dukha bhag bhavet, let there not be any distress for anyone. This was not just a sentimental expression of good wishes. There is a philosophical worldview which can give us the intellectual conviction and the practical direction to bring about this aspiration for universality and inclusiveness into actual reality. Thank you.
All right, Chaitanya ji, it was nice having you here. You spoke about demystifying reincarnation. His book is available online, so you can also go and buy it. It was great having you here with us, and thank you for doing this Q&A on reincarnation with us. And we hope to see you on more lives in the future soon.
Thank you.